The Unseen Menace, a psychological horror story. Dr. Evelyn Harper lived in a small town by the ocean. The town was peaceful. The air smelled like salt, and the waves made a soft sound at night. Everyone knew each other, and life was quiet. Evelyn was a marine biologist. She studied creatures in the ocean. Her lab was close to the beach, with big windows that looked out at the sea. She loved her job. Every morning, she would walk along the shore collecting samples. She loved the feel of sand under her feet and the cool breeze on her face. "Good morning, Dr. Harper," people in the town would say when she passed by. Evelyn always smiled and waved. She liked the quiet life. She liked the ocean. Her favorite place was her boat, the Blue Star. It wasn't a big boat, but it was strong. She used it to go out to the deeper waters where strange fish and glowing jellyfish lived. She loved the deep ocean, where things were calm and mysterious. One evening, Evelyn sat by her window with a cup of tea. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. She watched the waves gently roll onto the shore. Everything felt perfect. "I could stay here forever," she thought. But deep beneath the water, something was waiting, something old, something no one had seen before, and soon Evelyn's quiet life would change forever. One day, as Evelyn was working in her lab, she noticed something strange. Her equipment, which measured the sounds in the ocean, picked up a noise. It wasn't a normal sound, it was a low, regular pulse, like a heartbeat, coming from deep in the water. Thump, thump, thump. Evelyn stared at the screen. It was not an accident. It was too steady, too rhythmic. She had never heard anything like it before. At first, she thought it was just a small mistake. Maybe her equipment was broken. But when she checked the cables, the wires, and everything else, she saw nothing wrong. The pulse was real. She felt uneasy. She looked at the clock. It was late. The sun had already set, and the ocean outside her window was dark and quiet. The pulse seemed to come from the deep, far away from where she usually worked, but it was not a natural sound. She was sure of it. "Maybe I'm tired," Evelyn whispered to herself. She shook her head. "It's nothing." But she couldn't ignore it. She decided to listen to the pulse for a little while longer. She tried to calm herself, but the sound kept growing in her mind. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't a normal noise. It was like something was calling. That night, Evelyn lay in bed, but she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the pulse. Where was it coming from? Why hadn't anyone else noticed it? It wasn't part of the ocean, she knew. The next day, she went to the town's coffee shop for breakfast. She saw her friend Jake, who worked as a fisherman. They often talked about the ocean, and he told her stories of his trips on the water. "Jake, have you noticed anything strange in the ocean lately?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Jake looked at her, surprised. "Strange? Like what?" "I don't know, just something unusual." Jake thought for a moment, then he shook his head. "No, nothing strange, just the usual fish and waves." Evelyn nodded but didn't feel better. She thought about the pulse again. Maybe Jake hadn't heard it. Maybe no one had. She felt a small knot in her stomach. Was she the only one who noticed? After breakfast, Evelyn went back to her lab. She checked her equipment again. The pulse was still there. It hadn't stopped. But now something was different. It seemed closer. Thump, thump, thump. Evelyn was beginning to feel something she had never felt before. Fear. It wasn't just the pulse. It was the feeling that something wasn't right. Something was out there, and she couldn't understand it. She made a note in her journal. "Something is wrong. I will find out what it is." The days passed, but the pulse did not stop. It was always there in the back of Evelyn's mind. Every time she checked her equipment, it was the same sound. Thump, thump, thump. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Maybe it was just some fish making noise deep down in the water. But as the days went by, she couldn't ignore it anymore. The pulse was different. It felt too perfect, too regular. It sounded like it was alive. Evelyn spent every free moment in her lab staring at the screens. The pulse was getting louder. The more she listened, the more she began to hear other sounds, whispers, clicks, and strange hums hidden behind the thumps. It was as if the pulse was hiding something. One evening, after a long day of work, Evelyn decided to take the Blue Star out on the water. She needed to find where the pulse was coming from. She couldn't stop thinking about it. She had to know. As the boat rocked gently on the waves, Evelyn looked out at the dark water. The sun had set, and the stars were beginning to shine. The ocean seemed calm, but the sound of the pulse was louder now. It felt like it was coming from under her boat. She tried to use the sonar to scan the area, but the machine kept showing strange, fuzzy readings. There was nothing there, but the sound grew stronger. Thump, thump, thump. She turned off the engine and let the boat drift. Evelyn held her breath, straining to hear. The water was still, and the night was quiet. But then the pulse came again. It felt as if it was in her chest, thumping along with her heartbeat. "Where is it coming from?" she whispered. She had to find the source. The next morning she went to the library in the town. She searched old books and maps of the ocean. She wanted to know if anyone else had heard this strange pulse before, but no one had. There was nothing written about it. Evelyn felt her worry grow. There had to be something, some explanation, but all she found were empty pages. The more she looked, the more obsessed she became. She couldn't stop. She couldn't think about anything else. She began to lose sleep, her eyes red from too many hours spent staring at the screens, searching for answers. Her friends started to notice. "Evelyn, are you okay?" Jake asked one morning when he saw her at the coffee shop. He frowned, looking at the dark circles under her eyes. "You look tired." "I'm fine," Evelyn said quickly, "just working a lot." But Jake didn't look convinced. "You've been quiet lately. Is something wrong?" Evelyn shook her head, but inside, she felt a cold feeling growing. She couldn't explain it. She didn't want to tell him. She didn't want to tell anyone. She was starting to feel like she was the only one who understood what was happening. She was the only one who could hear the pulse. One night, Evelyn stood by the water again. She had a feeling she was close, so close to finding the answer. The dark sea stretched out in front of her, and the pulse was almost deafening now. Thump, thump, thump. It was there, just under the surface, waiting. And then, for a moment, Evelyn thought she saw something in the water. A shape moving just below the surface. It was fast and large, but she couldn't make it out clearly. Her heart raced. Was it the creature? Was it the source of the pulse? But before she could think, the shape disappeared. "Come back," Evelyn whispered, her voice shaking. "Come back." But there was nothing, only the still, dark water. And the pulse. Thump, thump, thump. Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about the shadow she had seen in the water. The shape that moved so quickly, like something huge and powerful. Was it real? Or had her mind started to play tricks on her? The pulse was still there, louder than ever. It felt like it was inside her head. Thump, thump, thump. She couldn't escape it. It was always in the background of her thoughts. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the shadow in the water again. Her heart raced. She had to know what it was. She had to see it again. Evelyn started to stay up all night, watching the ocean, listening to the pulse. She was alone in her lab most of the time. The town was quiet. Her friends had stopped visiting. They told her she was too obsessed. They said she should take a break, get some sleep. But Evelyn couldn't. She couldn't rest. Every time she tried, the pulse would start again. It felt like the ocean was calling her, and she had to answer. One evening, as the sun set, she went back to the Blue Star. She hadn't told anyone. They would only try to stop her. They didn't understand. She had to go out there. She had to find the truth. The boat rocked gently on the water. The pulse was there. Under her. Thump, thump, thump. It was almost like it was guiding her. Evelyn followed it, her eyes wide with fear and excitement. She didn't care about anything else, she only cared about the sound. The deeper she went into the ocean, the stronger the pulse became. It filled her mind. It was like the ocean was alive, like the whole sea was breathing with her. Suddenly, Evelyn heard something else, a voice. At first, she thought it was her imagination. Maybe she was just too tired, but the voice was clear. "Evelyn, you're close." Her heart skipped a beat. Who was speaking to her? She looked around, but no one was there. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice shaking. The voice answered, soft and strange. "Come closer, Evelyn. The answer is waiting." Evelyn felt her body tremble. She was scared, but she couldn't stop. She didn't want to stop. The pulse was calling her, and the voice was pulling her deeper into the ocean. She grabbed the boat's engine and turned it on. The boat sped forward, cutting through the dark water. She followed the pulse, ignoring everything else. Hours passed, but Evelyn didn't notice. The night was dark now, and the ocean was a deep black around her. The pulse was almost too loud to bear. It was everywhere, like it was inside her chest, inside her mind. Thump, thump, thump. Suddenly the engine cut out. The boat stopped moving. Evelyn's heart raced. She looked at the screen of her sonar. The pulse was right below her, but there was something else. A huge shape. It was so large it covered the whole screen. It was deep down in the water, but it was there. Her hands shook as she tried to turn the engine back on, but it wouldn't start. The boat was dead. Evelyn felt panic rise in her chest. She was stuck. She was so far from the shore. The ocean felt like it was closing in on her. The pulse was too strong. And then she heard the voice again. "You should not have come, Evelyn." Her blood ran cold. This was not just a voice in her head, it was real. Something was speaking to her from the ocean, something that wanted her to stay. Evelyn looked over the side of the boat. The water was dark and thick, hiding whatever was down there. She saw the shadow again. It was huge, moving slowly in the deep. It was almost like it was watching her. "Help!" Evelyn screamed, but the ocean swallowed her words. No one could hear her out here. She was alone. She felt her mind slip further into panic. What if the creature had been waiting for her? What if it had been calling her this whole time? What if it was too late to leave? Evelyn's thoughts raced as she tried to start the engine again. The pulse was louder now, pounding in her head. The boat began to move slowly, but the shape in the water stayed close. It wasn't leaving. The voice spoke again, clearer now, colder. "You cannot escape." Evelyn closed her eyes. She didn't know what was happening anymore. She didn't know if it was real or if she had lost her mind. But the pulse, the voice, the creature, they were all part of the same thing. And Evelyn was trapped, far out in the ocean, with nowhere to run. Evelyn's mind felt heavy as she sat alone in the boat, drifting slowly in the dark water. The pulse still throbbed in her chest, louder now than ever before. Thump, thump, thump. She closed her eyes, trying to escape it, but the sound wouldn't go away. It was inside her. It was like her heart had become the ocean, beating with the same rhythm. "Stop," Evelyn whispered to herself. "Stop thinking about it. It's not real." But as she opened her eyes, the world around her had changed. The sky was no longer black. Instead, it was full of strange colors, green, red, and purple, as if the stars were bleeding. The water beneath her boat shimmered with an unnatural glow, glowing like jellyfish. The air felt thick. The ocean was no longer just water. It was alive, breathing with every wave. Evelyn rubbed her eyes. She had to be dreaming, she had to be. But when she opened them again, the strange lights were still there. She looked at the shore. It was so far away now. Too far. "Help!" she whispered. But the sound of her voice felt strange. It didn't sound like hers. It sounded distant. She turned her head quickly. Something was moving in the water, something big. She saw the shadow again. It was massive, floating just below the surface. It was like a mountain under the water, moving slowly, circling her boat. "Go away," Evelyn breathed, her hands shaking. She tried to start the engine again, but it wouldn't turn on. It was dead, just like before. The pulse got louder, and she felt like it was crushing her chest. Thump, thump, thump. And then she saw it. A face. At first, she thought it was just a trick of the light, some reflection on the water. But when she looked closer, she saw it clearly. It was a face under the water, staring at her. The face was pale with deep, hollow eyes. Its mouth was open in a silent scream, but no sound came out. The face was not human. It was not like anything Evelyn had ever seen. It was too wrong. Evelyn gasped and stumbled back. "No," she whispered, too afraid to speak any louder. She tried to look away, but the face seemed to follow her. It was moving closer, drifting towards the boat with the pulse. Evelyn's breath quickened. She had to get away. She had to, but her hands were frozen on the boat's edge. She couldn't look away. The face, the eyes, they were alive, but they were not human. Thump, thump, thump. The pulse became faster, louder, until Evelyn felt like her body would break under the pressure. "Evelyn!" The voice came again, soft and cold, like it was coming from deep underwater. "Evelyn, you cannot hide from me." Her heart raced. She turned toward the voice, but all she saw was the dark water, the strange lights, and the creature, still circling beneath her. Then something worse happened. The water around her boat began to move, slowly at first. Then waves started crashing against the sides. Evelyn felt the boat rocking harder. Something was coming. She could feel it. Her thoughts were scattered, and the air felt thick, like something was pressing down on her. The face under the water began to shift, changing shape. It wasn't just one face now, it was many faces, all screaming silently, their eyes wide with terror. "Stop!" Evelyn shouted. She gripped the side of the boat, trying to hold on. The water was rising higher now. She could feel the cold, wet spray on her face as the boat rocked more violently. The faces, so many faces, started to reach for her. Their hands broke through the surface of the water, long fingers grasping toward her. "No!" Evelyn screamed, her voice breaking. She pulled her hands away from the water, but the faces kept coming. She closed her eyes, not knowing what to do. The pulse was now pounding in her ears, drowning out everything else. When she opened her eyes again, everything was quiet. The water had calmed, the faces were gone, the strange lights had disappeared, and the stars were back in the sky. But Evelyn didn't feel safe. Something had changed. She had seen the truth. She had seen what was under the ocean, and now it knew her. It knew she was there. The boat rocked slowly again, as if the ocean was breathing. Evelyn sat still, unable to move, unable to speak. The pulse was still there, pulsing in her chest like it was part of her. And she knew deep down that she could never escape it. The next day, Evelyn was not herself. Her mind was heavy, and the strange faces and voices from the ocean haunted her. She didn't sleep at all. The pulse was still inside her, thumping, thumping, thumping. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the dark water, the faces, and the creature watching her. She felt lost, but there was someone she could talk to, someone she trusted, Dr. Marcus Hayes. Marcus was her old friend, a scientist who worked with her on ocean research. They had worked together for years. He was calm, logical, and always there when she needed help. She had always gone to him when something was wrong. Evelyn decided she needed to speak with him. She called him and told him to meet her at the lab. When Marcus arrived, he found her sitting at her desk, her face pale, her hands shaking. "Evelyn, what's going on?" Marcus asked, his voice soft but worried. "You look terrible. You haven't slept, have you?" Evelyn looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear. "Marcus, I'm not imagining this. There's something in the ocean, something alive. It's calling me and I can't escape it." Marcus sat down beside her, his face full of concern. He put a hand on her shoulder. "Evelyn, you've been working too much. The ocean, the pulse, it's all just in your mind. You're exhausted. You need rest." "No, it's real," Evelyn said, her voice rising. "I've seen it. The creature, the faces. It's down there beneath the water and I can feel it. It's waiting for me." Marcus looked at her with pity in his eyes. "Evelyn, you're scaring yourself. You've always been so focused on your work and now you've let it take over. I know you. You need to step away. Take a break, get some sleep. Let me help you." Evelyn shook her head. I can't forget what I saw. I can't ignore the pulse. It's inside me." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said gently, "Evelyn, I'm your friend. I'm here for you. But if you don't rest, you're going to hurt yourself. The ocean is not calling you. It's your mind playing tricks. You need help." His words felt soft, almost like a lullaby. He was right, wasn't he? Maybe she was just too tired. Maybe the stress of her work had made her imagine everything. But deep down, Evelyn knew she couldn't ignore it. She couldn't ignore the pulse. But Marcus was her friend. He wanted to help. "Okay," Evelyn said quietly, her voice weak. "Okay, I'll rest. I'll take a break." Marcus smiled and squeezed her shoulder. "That's the right choice. I'll help you through this, Evelyn. You're not alone." Later that evening, Evelyn found herself in her small house by the beach. She tried to rest, but the moment she closed her eyes, the pulse came back. Thumping, pounding, growing louder in her chest. She could feel it all around her, vibrating through the walls. She couldn't escape it. But Marcus had told her to rest. He had told her it was just in her mind. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was going crazy. The next morning, she tried to keep herself busy. She went to the coffee shop for breakfast. But she couldn't stop thinking about the ocean. She couldn't stop thinking about the shadow she had seen, the faces, and the voice that had spoken to her. At the coffee shop, Marcus sat with her, his eyes gentle and kind. "Evelyn, you're doing well," he said. "You're starting to take care of yourself again. Just remember, rest is important. You'll feel better soon." Evelyn nodded, but deep inside, she felt something wrong. She didn't want to admit it, but she couldn't ignore the feeling. Marcus seemed so calm, so sure, but his words were starting to make her feel unsure. What if he was right? What if she was just imagining everything? And yet, a voice deep inside her whispered, "Don't trust him." But Marcus was her friend. He cared about her. Didn't he? Later that day, Marcus visited her again at the lab. He looked around at the screens and the equipment, his face serious. "Evelyn, you need to stop this. You're driving yourself crazy with all this research. This creature, it's not real. It's all in your mind. You have to trust me." His voice was calm, soothing, but there was something in his eyes, something she hadn't noticed before. He was trying to convince her, to make her believe it wasn't real. But why? Why was he pushing so hard? Evelyn felt a cold chill run down her spine. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe he was right. But something in her gut told her Marcus wasn't being honest. Was he trying to protect her, or was he hiding something? Was he trying to keep her from the truth? She looked at him, her heart racing. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I don't know what to believe anymore, but something is wrong. Something is out there in the ocean, and I have to find out what it is." Marcus smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're not ready for the truth, Evelyn," he said softly. "You're not ready to know what's down there. Trust me, I'm doing this because I care about you." Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about what Marcus had said. His words felt strange. They were kind, but they also made her feel like something was being hidden from her. The more she thought about it, the more she began to doubt him. Could he really be telling the truth? Was she just imagining everything? Or was he trying to stop her from finding something? One night, after Marcus left, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She was tired, but the pulse was still there. Thump, thump, thump. It was louder now, like it was coming from the ground beneath her feet. She closed her eyes, but she couldn't escape it. "I have to know," she whispered to herself. "I have to know what's in the ocean." The next morning, Evelyn decided to go back to the lab. She needed answers. She needed to be sure. Marcus had said so many things to try and calm her down, but deep down, she could feel that something wasn't right. She started to look through her notes again. But this time, she focused on the things she had ignored before. She went through the sonar readings, the strange pulse, and the patterns she had written down in her journal. Then she saw it, something that had always been there, hidden in the numbers, a pattern, a rhythm, a strange connection between the pulse and the deepest parts of the ocean. Evelyn's hands shook as she looked closer. There was a place, far from the town, where the pulse was strongest. It was like the pulse was coming from there, from deep in the ocean. But why? What was down there? She couldn't stop herself. She had to go. She grabbed her equipment, packed her things, and went straight to the Blue Star. She knew she was doing something dangerous, but she didn't care. She had to find out the truth. As she sailed out into the dark water, the pulse grew louder, almost like it was calling her name. She tried to push the fear away. This time, she would face it. Hours passed. The water was quiet, but the pulse kept growing stronger. Thump, thump, thump. It was all around her, vibrating in her bones. Evelyn was almost shaking with the pressure. The boat was small, and the ocean felt so big, so endless. She felt so small. And then she saw it. A huge, dark shape under the water, moving slowly like a shadow. It was massive, too big to be a whale or any animal she knew. It was so deep down she could barely see it, but she could feel it. The pulse was coming from there. It was alive. Suddenly the boat stopped. The engine died. The pulse got louder, like it was right under her. The water around her became still, but the air was thick. The boat began to shake as if something was pushing against it. "Help!" Evelyn cried out, but no one could hear her. She was alone, trapped in the middle of the ocean. Her hands were cold. She looked at the water, and then, from the depths, the truth began to reveal itself. The shadow wasn't just one thing, it was many. The deep sea was full of shapes, of things she couldn't understand. They were moving, twisting, like something ancient, something powerful. And in the center of it all, there was a face that was not human. It was huge, its eyes wide and unblinking, staring straight at her. The face seemed to recognize her. It was like it had been waiting for her. "Evelyn!" The voice came again, this time from deep in the water, clear and cold. It was not a voice she could hear with her ears, but it was in her mind. It was calling her. The face was so big now, it seemed to take up the entire ocean. The water rippled as it moved, as if the face was part of the sea itself. Evelyn's heart raced. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, this isn't real." But the face only stared at her, the pulse growing stronger, louder, more violent. She backed away, her legs shaking. The boat was moving now, pulled by the force of the ocean. It felt like something was pulling her into the water. "Please," she screamed, her voice breaking, "help me." But there was no help. No one would come. The face, the creature, was not interested in help. It was coming for her. Then the truth hit Evelyn like a wave. She understood everything, the pulse, the shadow, the faces, all of it. It had been there all along. The creature was not from the ocean. It was the ocean. The ocean had always been alive. It had been waiting for someone to see it, to feel its call. And now it had found her. The creature had been watching her for years. It had been watching all of them. It was part of the sea, part of the deep, ancient darkness that no one had ever understood. And now Evelyn was a part of it. She could feel it in her chest, in her soul. She was no longer alone. The creature had claimed her. It was inside her. She could hear its thoughts, feel its pulse. She could never escape. Thump, thump, thump. It was inside her. It was everywhere. And now she was part of the ocean too. Evelyn sat in the boat, staring at the dark water, her heart still racing. The pulse was inside her, louder than ever before. She could feel the creature, the ocean, breathing with her. It wasn't just in her mind anymore, it was real. She was part of it now. The face in the water was gone, but the creature was still there, deep beneath the ocean. She could feel it. It was waiting, watching, like it was deciding what to do next. Evelyn closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She couldn't think straight. The truth was too much. She had found the creature, yes, but now she didn't know what to do. She had learned something horrible, something that could change everything. What if I tell people? What will happen? Evelyn thought. She could go back to the shore. She could tell the world what she had seen. She could warn everyone. The ocean was not just water, it was alive. The creatures in the deep, the pulse, everything was real. They were not just stories or myths. But there was something that stopped her. What if telling everyone destroyed everything? What if the creature in the ocean didn't want to be found? What if the world wasn't ready for the truth? Would people panic? Would they try to destroy the ocean, trying to fight something they didn't understand? And then there was the other thought, the one that made her stomach twist. What if the ocean was calling her for a reason? What if she was meant to be part of it? Maybe she was the one who had always been chosen. Maybe the creature was waiting for her to accept it, to join it. She was already connected to it. She could feel it. She could hear the pulse in her chest, in her mind. The ocean was alive, and she was alive with it. She was part of something bigger now. She could feel the power, the ancient energy of the sea. She could never go back. Her thoughts raced. She felt torn. If she told the world, she would risk destroying everything, the ocean, the creature, even herself. But if she chose to stay silent, she would forever be bound to this terrible, beautiful truth. She would never be free again. Am I ready? Evelyn whispered to herself. Can I live with this? Or will I destroy everything I know? Her hands shook as she gripped the side of the boat. The decision was too big. The weight of it was pressing down on her chest. Suddenly she felt something pull at her. It was the pulse, stronger than ever. She could hear the voice in her mind. Not clear words, but a feeling. The creature was calling her. Come to me, join me, become part of the ocean, feel the pulse forever. It is your destiny. Evelyn closed her eyes, breathing fast. She could feel the ocean inside her. She could feel the creature deep below, waiting for her. She could choose to accept it. She could join the ocean, become one with it. The thought terrified her, but it also felt like the only choice left. She would never be alone again. The ocean would always be with her. She would be safe. But if she chose to leave, to stop the pulse and walk away, she would have to live with the truth. She would have to tell everyone what she had found. She would be a part of something so dangerous, something that no one could control. It could be the end of everything. Evelyn's mind felt like it was spinning. Her heart was pounding in her chest. She looked out at the water, and for the first time, she felt something she had never felt before. Fear. What if she couldn't make the right choice? What if there was no right choice? She stared down into the water. It was calm now, but she could feel the power deep beneath it. The ocean was calling to her, offering her a place, a purpose. She would never be alone again. But was that enough? Was it worth the price? Evelyn closed her eyes, trying to block out the pulse, trying to think clearly. The ocean was not just a thing anymore, it was a part of her. The creature, it knew her, and she knew it. It was a part of her soul. She couldn't escape it now, but if she accepted it, there would be no turning back. She would never be the same again. She would lose everything she had ever known. But maybe that was the only way to survive. Evelyn took a deep breath and made her decision. She turned the boat back toward the shore, her heart heavy with the weight of her choice. Evelyn sailed back to the shore. The pulse inside her was still there, deep in her chest, but she was trying to ignore it. She had made her decision. She was going to leave the ocean behind. She was going to escape. But the closer she got to the shore, the more she felt the pull of the ocean. It was like the water was reaching out for her, calling her back. She could feel the creature beneath the surface, waiting, watching her. It wanted her.